Good evening, everybody. I trust you've had a fruitful day. I do not say happy, though I hope it has been happy. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Buddha, the blessed, noble, and fully self-awakened one. So we were making our way through dependent origination, and just a question came through. Let's have a look if I can find it. Say a bit more about basic delusion, unknowing part. Is this something we accept as a condition of life? Does it fall away with enlightenment? Does consciousness dissolve and become intuitive awareness, a higher form of knowing? Right. Well, I'm hoping that question will be answered as we go along. And if it's not, the questioner will surely send me another email. Just for that part about the unknowing or the not knowing, of course, there is something that doesn't know. There's something that is not seeing properly, right? One of the key phrases of the Buddha is to see, is to understand and see how things come to be, or how things have come to be, because he's basically into process. So there is something there which is knowing, right? The knowing. And of course, that's what we come to understand to be our awareness. But we'll come to that. So just to recap very quickly, we have this baseline. At the bottom of it, there is this misunderstanding, this delusion. So remember, a delusion is that a person has a wrong view of something and presumes it's correct. The whole definition of delusion is that the deluded don't know they are deluded. As soon as you know you're deluded, then in a sense you're going to find your way out of that delusion. So from ignorance we have this delusive way of behaving in the world, and that manifests as our habits, right? And every time one of these habits comes up, it comes into consciousness. So consciousness is the screen upon which it arises. So the Buddha talks about the sankhara and the consciousness as two sheaths of hay. Remember, they're all agricultural metaphors. Yeah? So to stack the hay, having cut it into sheaths, they would stack it one against the other. I'm sure you've seen that in pictures, European pictures even. So, and then depending on that, on consciousness, on that screen, the body, heart and mind arise. And with it, of course, your six sense bases. Remember, the sixth is the mind. And then once that's settled, every moment, you've got that underneath every moment, that is contact. Okay? So we're moving on from contact. At contact, there are the six sense bases, the sense objects that they are contacting, and of course consciousness. If any of those three are not there, then contact is not possible. So obviously, if you're deaf, you won't be able to hear sounds. If you're in a very quiet room, there won't be anything to hear as such. And if you're not awake, if you're not conscious, then you won't hear it anyway. So those three factors have to be there to make contact. Now, the next stage is Vedana, feeling. And feeling is, at the simplest level, we've done this actually at some point, just the five feelings. There's physical feelings, sensations, which are pleasant or unpleasant. And there are mental feelings, emotions, moods, as we experience them in the body as feelings, pleasant and unpleasant. And there's a whole area in between pleasant and unpleasant, which are normally talked of as just neutral. The word that's used is upekkha, which really has many meanings, but it just means neutral, a neutral feeling. It's neither pleasant or unpleasant. If we get right close to it, actually, you'll see that it shades. It shades one way or the other. Now, that's the point where we either like or dislike, right? That's how you can say you experience it. I like it or I don't like it. Okay. But then remember, it's the next point, the tanha, where there's this desire for something, either a desire to get it or a desire to get rid of it. And when it's unskillful like that, what we're doing is we're trying to manipulate the world in order to create this inner sense of happiness. So that's your tanha. Even desires arising out of compassion, truthful joy, caring, and all that will unfortunately have some level of self involved. And that's why you have to be, shall we say, super aware when you want to do something out of the goodness of your heart, right? You've got to actually say to yourself, well, I'm doing this for my benefit, because sometimes you have to do something for yourself. I am doing it entirely for the benefit of others, or both. Now, in the monastic life, and indeed when I was in Sri Lanka especially, you don't say thank you. See, if you give me, so if you're, say, in the East and you offer me food, I don't say thank you. If you give me a present, an alarm clock, a mobile, I don't say thank you. I receive it. You see. Now, if the giver thinks, oh, they didn't say thank you, you know, how horrible, you know, how uncivilized, you see, then a part of their giving was to get the praise. See, so it's a mirror back to the giver. So if you give something and the person doesn't say thank you, then and you have a reaction to that, then there's a part of you that was giving it a little pat on the back. Now, in our culture, of course, you have to say thank you, or else you get very upset. There was a lovely occasion at the Buddhist Vihara where Vajra, who was actually my first teacher, we put her ashes in the pond here. It was a lovely little ceremony. She was in the room with Bhante in the Vihara, and somebody came and gave him a book, you see, and she was trying to teach him sort of British ways, or at least Western ways, but British ways, you know. So when he took the book, of course, he didn't say anything. He just put it down to the side. So he said to her, she said to him, Bhante, when somebody gives you something, you have to say thank you. And he said, why? It's my book. He's only given his book back. He didn't understand why he should say thank you. So this business of thank you is a moot point. Generally speaking, though, if we're coming from the good heart, then we can presume that there's not that much greed involved, you know. But when the tanha is there, there is definitely some strong desire. So that's the position of tanha vedana. Like it, want it. Like it, want it. Okay. So there's your two distinct reactions, or two distinct responses to an original impact, an original contact. Okay, so very simply, on a hot day like this, it's been very hot, you see, you might see an ice cream, or you might have ice cream in the fridge, and the thought comes up, you see. So that was your first contact, and then with it they'll be coming, oh yeah, I'd like to like, and then the wanting. Okay. Now the next stage, we'll come back to that in a minute. The next stage is this grasping. It's translated as grasping, upadana. This is we came across that image of fire, and how in our more modern science, it's the friction between two sticks that are creating the heat that creates the fire, whereas in their physics, the rubbing of two sticks was creating conditions for the fire element, which is all around, to come down to the wood and grasp it. Okay, so it was that idea of grasping something. Now, the grasping has four different qualities. It can be a grasping because of just sensual desire that has in it. It's also a grasping coming from views. You know, this is mine. I want this, right? Right. We'll come to a minute. There's also doing things for rituals that you think are actually material to the path. So in Buddhist terms, you know, making offerings to the Buddha, lighting candles, even the offering of help or presents to the needs or requisites to the monks is all you need to do to become liberated. Well, that would be a wrong understanding. Now, the actual rituals themselves may be fine. You know, lighting candles, lighting incense, it all creates a good atmosphere in order to sit. But if a person thinks that is somehow crucial to the path, then in a sense they've misunderstood. But the core upadana, the core grasping, is identity, personality view. This is me, I. So there you have it. There you have that flow. So you've got the contact, you've got the want. So you've got the contact, you've got the like, you've got the want, and then you've got the I want. Now, it's only at the I want, actually, that you're suffering. You're not suffering when the desire is there. It's that little moment. I mean, these things happen so quickly in ordinary daily life that it's, you know, it's almost, it's difficult to separate it, frankly. I would say generally impossible. Unless you're really, you know, with it, unless you're really awake, wide awake. But in meditation, you can see it. Just very simple. There might be, you might get an itch, you know, on your nose, and it's not likable. You want to scratch it, and then I will scratch it, and before you know it, your hands move to give it a little scratch. So that moment of identity is the moment when you're actually moving with that desire, and that's when the suffering comes, when you identify with the reaction. So even though being in a state of desire is uncomfortable, right? So you can feel the desire to scratch your nose, you see, and it's there. You can ask yourself, well, when I take a really objective position to the itching and to the feeling of wanting to scratch, is there any suffering as such? Okay, it's the same with pain in the knee from the sitting posture. You might say to yourself, oh, well, you know, pain in the knee, I'm going to change posture. But if you hold it there for a minute, then you'll see there's the desire to move. And if you're objective about it, if you can actually lift the awareness out of that connection and see it objectively, there's no suffering. But there's always that little sort of in between bit where you're sort of falling into the identity, but not completely, and that can be a very uncomfortable position until you give in and then move your leg. So now at that point, you see, there's only that identity. So we need one more factor to complete the act, and that, of course, is the will, which takes the potential of wanting into an action, and that's the bhava, that's the becoming. So it is a karma, it's an act, it's a bhava, it's a becoming, because the self is involved. There's a creation of a self, right? And of course, there's that the power that makes it happen, the will. So those are your three components, although the Buddha does state that action and the will are one and the same thing, okay? So that's your process within dependent origination, right? There is a bit ending, but that's your main process. The contact, the liking or disliking, the wanting or not wanting, the I want, I don't want, and then the getting. Okay, the achieving or the actual process of the action. Then, of course, you've got the beginning of that process, the middle bit, the growing old, the decay, and then the ending of it. So that's the last bit. Now, that's if you look at this dependent origination from a moment-to-moment process, which is perfectly viable. But it's also seen as a three-life process, so that in the past life, you've developed all these conditionings, you're born, and then you go through this whole process that we've just discussed. And then when you die, and then in life, you're born, you grow old, and you die. So the whole process is one of circularity, okay? So there are two interpretations. But for our purposes as seekers of liberation from suffering, it would be more skillful to see it as a moment-to-moment process, right? So it's not always happening. It's not happening when you're asleep, for instance, okay? So that's the dependent origination. Now, I'm actually going to put as a note underneath the video the two books that are very viable. There's one written by a Thai scholar called Venerable Payutto. Where is it? Here we are. And you can download it as a PDF. It's just called Causation. Yes, Causation. Oh dear me. No, the Great Discourse on no. Dependent origination, the Buddhist law of conditionality. That's it. So don't worry, I'll put it on the info that goes with the video. But if having read that and feeling that you want to go a bit deeper, there's a book by Bhikkhu Bodhi on the Great Discourse of Causation, and that really takes you into a different level of understanding. But in terms of our liberation from suffering, the core understanding is that if we hang on to see that desire of wanting, not wanting, what is likable or unlikable, and have that moment of awareness where we can say, well, look, it would be skillful for me to do this. It would be unskillful for me to do this. And if it's unskillful, you just wait for that energy to exhaust itself. And if it is skillful, of course, you do it. That in itself is A, the purification of the heart, and B, you're beginning to understand the cause of suffering, which is that form of desire, and that itself is an entrance into one of the paths and fruits. So remember there are 4 stages: the stream entrant, the once returner, the non-returner, and finally the arahat himself, the completely liberated. So that little bit there between Vedana, feeling, liking, disliking, and Tanha, wanting, not wanting, that's your escape. That's our escape. I'm still working on it. Okay, I think we'll just very quickly finish off with the fact that there is, of course, a reverse to that. So it reads like this: with the remainderless fading away and cessation of ignorance, the remainderless fading away and cessation of ignorance comes the cessation of habits, volitional formations, and so forth. With the cessation of formations comes the cessation of consciousness. Now be careful here. This is the consciousness of the Kanda. With the cessation, because the Buddha is conscious, I mean, he's walking around and he's eating and he's chatting, so he's not, and he's fully liberated, right? It's the consciousness of delusion, the delusive consciousness that arises. Yes, remember, the English word is so confusing because consciousness is also means a sort of knowing. It doesn't just mean a representation on a screen. With the sensation of consciousness is the sensation of mentality, materiality, body and mind. With the cessation of materiality and mentality, the cessation of the sixfold sense base. With the cessation of the sixfold sense base, cessation of contact. Remember, this is wrong contact, yeah, deluded contact. With the cessation of contact, cessation of feeling. With the cessation of feeling, the cessation of craving. With the cessation of craving, the cessation of clinging. Cessation of clinging, cessation of becoming. With the cessation of becoming, cessation of birth. With the cessation of birth, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief and despair all cease. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. In this way, Ananda, a bhikkhu can be called skilled in dependent origination. So that's really core teaching. The dependent origination is really core teaching. And it's worth, reading that book I mentioned and just see if you get a little bit deeper into it. And then to use your meditation to actually see those steps very clearly, the contact, but especially this Vedana, the feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, the wanting, to really feel, like what is a desire? What does a desire feel like? So remember, desire always comes from a place of unsatisfactoriness and is itself unsatisfactory until it's fed. And there are some desires that we should feed, and there are some that we shouldn't. So I think that, yes, so we're moving on, time moves on. So I think that brings us to the end of that little bit. This is actually a discourse the Buddha thought highly of. So we'll go into it. So we're going to the other parts tomorrow. Very good. I can only hope my words have been of some assistance and that I've not caused even greater confusion, and that by your practice you will be liberated from all sufferings sooner rather than later.